Good morning. Welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Social Media Manager for HAR. I'm very excited about the panel that we have this morning that I'll be introducing in just a moment. You can see their names on the screen, but we're excited to have some diverse leadership here today. I would categorize today's show as a very special one for Member Focus Monday. We always try to bring you the most relevant topics that are going on in the industry. And the death of George Floyd has definitely shifted the national focus away from coronavirus. And since he was a Houstonian and the visitation is taking place later today and the funeral will be held tomorrow, that makes this discussion all the more timely. Before we introduce our panel, I do want to share just a quick message from your 2020 HAR Chairman, John Nugent. So let's take a look at his message really quick.
Thank you all for joining us this morning. I'm John Nugent, your 2020 Chairman of HAR. I want to start off by saying that I am so proud that we're having this discussion this morning. HAR posted a graphic on social media last week that said, "Racism has no home here." I wholeheartedly agree. I want you to know that I fully support our efforts to address racism in our industry and in the world. I'm glad that I could be the chairman who establishes our first diversity and inclusion advisory group. It is sad that it is necessary, but I hope that we can be able to make a difference. Each of us must do our part. Just by participating or watching today's show, I believe that you'll be taking the first step. I believe that when we listen to our fellow realtors, no matter what the issue, we all hopefully come away with a better understanding of each other. Thank you, and I look forward to listening to the panelists as they share their stories and insight.
So again, thank you for joining us today. According to Dr. Stephen Kleinberg from Rice University, we live and work in the most diverse city in America, yet racism still persists. So rather than acting like it doesn't exist, we wanted to discuss it head on today, openly, respectfully, and freely. We're going to be talking about some uncomfortable things, but that's okay. We need to have these discussions to be able to move forward. So first, I, again, would like to welcome our guests today, starting with Danny Garcia, and we'll just kind of go around and have everybody introduce themselves. So we'll start with you, Danny.
Hey, Christina, thank you for giving us some time here. First of all, my name is Danny Garcia. I am the president for NAHREP Houston. We have 3 chapters here in the Houston area, one in Katy and one in North Houston. And we are here to, our job and our goal is to be a voice to the Hispanic community and, and advocating for them in home ownership. One of the things is, by the way we do is educate and empowering the real estate professionals, all of them, not just the Hispanic real estate professionals, on how to serve the Hispanic community. And then we advocate also for public policy that supports the trade association's mission. And how do we do this is basically by, facilitating relationships for industry stakeholders, real estate practitioners, and other professionals within the industry. So we're here to serve you guys. And, even though it says National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, we are here for all of our practitioners.
Very good. Thank you so much, Danny. And we can go ahead and Mike, you actually have been on this program before in a different aspect as our 2019 Realtor of the Year. But if you could just quickly introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good morning, and thank you for having me today. I'm Mike Wong. I'm the 2020 chairman of the Asian American Real Estate Association here in Houston. I work as a commercial realtor at Keller Williams Southwest, and our organization is just about educating and providing information to our members and our consumers so that we can serve them better.
Very good. LaDonna Park.
Hey, good. First, I want to thank HAR for hosting this timely topic, and Christina for pouring her heart and soul and enthusiasm into putting this very timely topic together. The Houston Black Real Estate Association, the local chapter of NAREB, the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. We were founded in 1947 because during that period we could not be realtors. And we could not join NAR. So we created our own designation called Realtors, which we still enjoy today. And NAREB is the minority trade association in the nation. And the Houston chapter started in 1949, consistently ranks among the top three chapters in the nation. Our mission is democracy in housing and wealth building through real estate. And our goal is to create 2 million Black homeowners over 5 years. I'm also a broker associate with the mighty Keller Williams Southwest office that I'm actually in with Mike Long, who is one of my heroes. I've served on the Agent Leadership Council and the Master Faculty. I am a member of the Board of Directors for TAR, and I serve on the Mayor's Houston Community Land Trust as well.
Wonderful. Busy lady. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Grant Harpold, who again is no stranger to this program.
Christina, it's quite an honor to be here. Thank you for allowing me to be here. Yes, Grant Harpold, HAR Legal Counsel. Been practicing law now for 30 plus years, and I'm excited to be a part of this discussion today.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you so much. And again, thank you to each of our panelists for being here today. I think that part of what captured people's attention about George Floyd is the story. And I think stories are an easy way for us all to understand one another. I think there was even more of an outcry here in Houston once we found out he was a Houstonian. So I wanted to start out by asking each of you to talk about maybe an instance of racism that you've experienced, maybe in your personal life or in your business. Myself being Latina and growing up in a predominantly white area, I definitely have my fair share of stories as well, but I would like to hear from you. So we could go in the same order. Danny, if you would start for us.
Well, I mean, number one is I'm in the same boat. I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. Actually, the neighborhood I grew up in was the original NASA neighborhood. So I actually got to share with a lot of people. And I grew up also, single mom, 2 kids, and we had a little sister with Down syndrome. So my case is probably a little bit more different because having a Down syndrome sister opened up my eyes about compassion, understanding other people. So I always give people a benefit of a doubt. But in the industry, one of the things I continuously see is, for example, something that happened to me personally a while back is, I was with a family and, Latino family, and they wanted to buy a house. Went over to one of the, without naming communities or anything, to a neighborhood that was, had a lot of high-end homes. And I remember walking in there with my clients, and they were all mechanics. I had just been at their shop, and they walked, they said, hey, we want to buy a house. We've been kind of looking around, and we want to see this particular neighborhood. So I'm like, great, let's go. We packed up. They just cleaned up, greasy everything, and we walked into the builder. And something I still see sometimes is some people, and I'm not saying just necessarily white because I see it from all sides, start judging people by the way they look when they walk in. And, going back in my mind, I would say, okay, let me not jump into the race card. It's just probably a lack of knowledge or something else. So the sales rep there looked at my client and said, well, hey, I have a client coming in for this particular house we we're looking at. And she says, could you wait and make an appointment? I'm like, your appointment's an hour away. They just want to walk it through. So I picked up the phone, called another sales rep who is white. He said, Danny, I'm there. I'm going to help you out. We walked in, they walked the house, they loved it, and we put under contract immediately that moment. Those 5 days later, and when the other sales rep came out there, I remember my other friend said, the other sales guy said, hey, the house is sold. She was like shocked. And she looked at them, and my client just looked, she goes, and she just kind of looked down at us, and, I kind of blew it off because number one is we move on, we keep moving forward. And, I see it up till now where that happens consistently, where I'll walk a high-end home with one of my minority clients and, they'll feel like, hey, you know what, are they looking at us like we can't afford this house or what? So that's probably like the most common thing I see within our industry. And up till now, it's still happening. And I just think, many times, like one person asked me straight out, and she was just being, a good friend of mine. She goes, I guess in our mind, we just think Latinos don't have money, Danny. She goes, and that's how we were raised to believe, and I'm seeing in the Woodlands around me how many Mexicans buy houses cash. She goes, they're homeowners. She goes, I'm still financing my house. So she goes, so maybe I need to start seeing things from a different perspective and not what I'm being told over and over by the media. So that's one thing I did want to share. And going back, ironically in the story, it was a white, sales rep, but a white salesperson gave us first class, assistant, and there's many of them like that. There's very few who will do that, but that's probably one of the most common things I see here and there. And it goes back. I think it's just re-educating, the practitioners and not seeing people based on, how they look, what they're wearing, or, the color of their skin, But other than that, I mean, that's something I do want to address for the practitioners there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Danny. Mike, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Um, you know, just struggling. It's sad that we're still having these discussions and experiences in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine being in the most diverse city in the United States and we're having these issues. Just thinking back, it's hard to pick a story, but just growing up, I think I've just, in my mind, is just to overcome and overcoming these stereotypes or overcoming, these comments and these whispers. To me, it's still childish. I hear, people mocking the Asian accents. I hear people making fun of our names, slanting their eyes at us, things like that. Those are things I experienced as a kid. I don't expect to experience as an adult, but just growing up, I've learned to kind of ignore it. And I think I've gotten a thicker skin now to where I started doing that. And I didn't recognize and realize it until I started preparing my mind for this conversation today of how much I've actually ignored. And I think, that's the root of the problem and why we're here having this conversation.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. LaDonna?
Well, for me, this was the most thought-provoking question of all because in preparing, I had to ponder some, just a multitude of experiences that I've had over 57 years on the planet, starting with, the red line when I actually started my career in real estate in Ferguson, Missouri, of all places, where Michael Brown was killed. And I said, well, maybe that. Then I thought about, well, what about the incident that I had at my daughter's school that was so horrific? And I said, well, what about the experiences that I've had, like Danny, out in the field with. And what about the experience that I had where information and other people took my intellectual property and claimed it and used it as their own? So racism, as Mike said, it's just daily. It's constant. It's almost a part-time job with even what we're doing. So what I decided to share as my experience is the experience that we're having right now. Amid a global pandemic, then you have a racial epidemic amid yet an economic implosion for the Black community. Because at the end of this, as I've heard my colleagues say, it's not about me, it's not about us, it's about our communities. And it's about the entire community and how we'll be impacted. So let me just be clear today. I don't speak for all Black people. I don't speak for Keller Williams. So I don't want anything to be taken out of context because racism is brutal. And I thank God for this moment because we are finally having the conversation. How many years for us, for Black people, it's been 400 years. And this is the impression that I really want to leave people with as we look over the experience that we're having with Mr. Floyd. $20 and a stereotype. $20 and a stereotype is what has us here today having the conversation. Because somebody decided that he was trying to pass false bad money, right? And as it turned out, he was not passing bad money. So somebody made a phone call, thereby weaponizing the police. The police came along and criminalized the black man, and then murdered him in broad daylight, where we all watched for the 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Now, this is all happening amid a global pandemic where most people are shut in. So America is shut down, watching television, paying attention for a change, all of us, right? And we're all in this collective crisis. We're in this collective trauma as it is. And oh boy, here come the police killing yet another black man. We had not even had an opportunity to mourn the loss of Ahmaud Arbery. I mean, think about it. You know, we hadn't even gotten through that. It was just last week that his assailants were arraigned.
Right.
We had not gotten past Breonna Taylor. I mean, so we've got 3 black people with names, with families that we are forced to acknowledge. And what I'm most proud of is the corporate community, like Keller Williams, for example. Gary Keller made a profound statement shutting down racism. Our national president, Vince Moulton, spoke up. So all of the speaking up is very important. However, we need to make sure that we have some action that follows this. We need to make sure that in the wake of these murders, as the world is speaking, we do something. So this is my reality. And when I see the nation, so we've got all of America and 18 other countries that are standing up saying this is not right. We've got corporate America. And so at this point in the game, what do? We have to be properly educated on where we are. So I'm going to make a quick note on Black home ownership rates and where we are as an association. Last year, we started at 41% Black home ownership rate in America. At a historic low, it's lower than it was when we passed the Fair Housing Act, compared to 79% with whites. We had gotten up to 44% at the beginning of 2020. So what we need to be clear on is that as a collective association, what we need, and NARAB we have some calls to action, which I won't go through all right now, but we have, and what we think is that we can work together as realtors, realtists, to ensure that Black people come out whole on the other side of this pandemic. So this is my great story.
Thank you. Thank you. And, I do appreciate everyone sharing those stories. I think it's important for us to hear, and it's important for us to, as you said, have these discussions, listen when people are talking, and do something as we move forward. So thank you to each of you. Grant, I have a question for you. We unfortunately have seen some fairly awful statements being made by just a handful of our members on social media, on their personal Facebook pages or Twitter accounts or Instagram accounts. When does freedom of speech cross into being a violation of code of ethics or fair housing or TREC anti-discrimination regulations?
Well, sadly, every day. And so that's something that we need to deal with, because just because you can say something doesn't mean that you can act upon what you say and do things that might be perceived as being racist. And it doesn't matter, to me, it doesn't matter whether it's from the business side or the personal side. There should be no distinction between the two. I mean, if you say things, you act a certain way on the business side, but then act another way on the personal side, then that's no good. So it really should start on the personal side to carry over to the business side. And so your conduct and how you conduct yourself, it's not so much guarded by the First Amendment. I mean, the First Amendment gives me the right as an employer or as a business owner to say you're fired for that. You know, that's First Amendment speech right there, and that could be whether you did something on your business side or on your personal side. So I think it's important to remember that you know, how you conduct yourself should not be just isolated to what people see me in the business world. It should be all across, whether on the personal side or the business side. This should be radiating in your head as to conducting yourself in a manner that is sensitive to everybody's needs, to everybody's thoughts. And it's you know, it's not something that may come naturally. So the person who is not acting in a manner that is worthy of this discussion, you know, perhaps that person, and I think I saw this earlier, perhaps that person should be mentored or talked to. I mean, we shouldn't, you know, banish somebody to eternal ignorance and sort of, you know, educate them, bring them along. You know, let's fix this thing. Let's have this discussion. That person or these people who might be saying things, quote, on their personal side, but not in the business side, we need to have a discussion with them and mentor them or talk to them or get them some education. Like, you know, maybe that this is wrong.
Yeah.
This kind of conduct should not be tolerated on your personal side. And we know in the business side we have rules, but, you know, I think it really starts on your personal side is where we need to address it.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Grant. And I'm just taking a look at our comments, and I do see there were a couple questions too, but just wanted to share one comment that I just saw. Julio said, "So glad this is being addressed today. The members on this live forum are on the right target." So again, to our panelists, you guys are helping us understand, and I think we're all on the right target for anybody who's watching this and for our panelists. So thank you again. So next thing I kind of wanted to hear from you guys. What do you think can be done to improve the issue of race, either in the real estate industry or in general? You've shared a little bit of that, but is there anything else that we didn't mention yet? Any of our panelists can chime in if you have something.
I think first people need to acknowledge that racism is a systemic problem, and second, in addition to it being a systemic problem, we need to look at how it's being taught in schools. Because as Grant mentioned, people have awakened and they want to know, but what I encourage is that you don't go back to the same books that you learned from to figure out what's happening, because in a big way, the history books are not accurately written to reflect the contribution of groups, and various historic events have been omitted. And not only have many of us learned them properly, but our children are not learning what's correct. And then finally, we need to work together. We need to we need to collaborate on education and empowerment towards really understanding one another and come from love and not hate.
Excellent. Does anyone else have something they want to share?
I know in my case, I've kind of taken personal responsibility, in educating my kids. I mean, I can't go around trying to, correct everybody or so forth, but, in my household is where it starts. And, right now, my kids, always grew up just seeing everybody equal. And when we starting to see everything that's going on, my kids are asking questions that, I'm not going to say that I try to avoid, but now putting people in these labels like, here's my black friends, here's my Asian friends, and then remember that friend we went to their house, and, she was wearing a burqa and all that stuff. Now I had to start breaking it down into, the differences between us all. And I hate doing that because they would go and they would interact with these kids. And I remember one of my Muslim clients, she goes, wow, your kids walked in here. They never asked me why I had a burqa on. They never questioned anything about it. They went right upstairs, played with our kids. So, what I'm doing and going back, I think it's personal responsibility for all of us and also for our leaders out there, even among the church and ourselves, is basically, we got to lead by example. And our pastor said this yesterday, and we have to also listen and love. I think that's what's going on, is that a lot of us don't take the time to understand another culture, understand where they're coming from. Right now, what's going on is I'm listening more now because and I'm going to be very transparent, guys. I never understood the Black Lives Matter movement. And now going back this quarantine, I think it happened for a reason.
Yeah.
I'm listening and I'm seeing where, my Black friends and brothers are coming from. And this is something I realized where maybe I wasn't digging in deeper to understand what was going on. And that's something I think we can all do, is just sit down and listen, and not only that, take it into our household. Because honestly, guys, I grew up as a youth pastor, with a bunch of, helping kids. And I always understood something in your background always geared you to do something. So I always give people a benefit of a doubt. How did they grow up? I was reading an article yesterday where some of the people who have mistreated Black lives, grew up in a household where they lived in the eras of the 40s, the 50s, where, we were just getting out of slavery. So how do you expect them to have a different thought process when they're still being impacted by the way their parents taught them, So I'm very optimistic, and I believe our generation now, who many of us are the parents and we didn't grow up and see that, are teaching them differently. So I feel very positive about the future of America, not because of, naming presidents, politicians, because we're taking personal responsibility. And the way we're growing up now, we're actually exposing our kids to more cultures, and America continues becoming that melting pot. So I think it all starts with, personal responsibility and, us educating our friends, people around us, our family members. And I think this is going to be the best way to go.
Yeah, that's such a good point. For me personally, my parents' generation was the generation that tried to hide their race. They didn't learn Spanish because they were afraid to, they were afraid of discrimination. But whereas with my daughter, she's Mexican, German, Irish, and Italian. So we're going to make sure that she understands all of those cultures growing up. So that's excellent. My next question, and Mike, if you could address this for us, any thoughts on how HAR can help in these efforts? And Rob Hahn actually brought up a question. He said, since education was brought up, how can HAR deal with the disparity between rich and poor school districts? So, Mike, any thoughts on that, or any thoughts on how HAR can help with this issue?
Well, definitely just kind of touching on what Danny says, we have to listen, right? And as leaders, we have to provide for our members. Maybe that's an opportunity where HAR comes together with our groups and we start looking at these communities that are underserved with information, or they're underserved because they don't meet the financial expectations. That it's another form of discrimination in our industry. Every industry has a few bad apples. We hear that, with the police, and, it's up to us as members of HAR to protect and preserve our industry and how we appear to our consumers. It's, I look at HAR, it's our association that takes actions, and they hold us to the higher standards. I'm glad, kind of not glad of what happened, but I'm glad to see a very swift and quick response to kind of the comments and some of the people that just created these issues that we're dealing with. Looking at our leadership, looking at our organization from top to bottom, we've got an association here in Houston with a diverse board, a diverse, staff, and it represents the members perfectly. We've got strong multicultural groups and leaders like LaDonna and Danny and, the other NAREP chapters. We've got Casey with Aria and Danny coming in. We've got my association. So we've got all the pieces in place, and that, I think it's just going to take a collaborative effort between all of us to really put forth, to really set in motion a change. I mean, these conversations are good to have, but they don't mean anything if we don't walk away and do something. So, you hear this all the time, and people make it like a motivation thing, but I'll say it. It's just, don't just talk about it, be about it.
Yeah.
Be the positive change you want to see in the world, and you have to commit to following through. You can't just sit back and complain. You have to take action. We have to set the example and take the lead for our communities.
Very good. So I'm sorry, go ahead, Lizana.
So I just want to add to what Danny and Mike are bringing to the table, that one of NAREB's calls to action is to reform, for cities to reform our foreclosure laws. And right now, again, I go back to my current reality with the pandemic. On the other side of this pandemic is increased foreclosures in communities of color. And as an association, I'd like to see HAR take leadership in foreclosure prevention. So instead of real estate professionals circling like vultures to get deals for investors and get REO listings, I think that we have an opportunity now to collaborate and be on the other side of this pandemic to help those people who are on the front line working now, whose HAR take leadership in. And what the vision is that as an association, we can make some demands of lenders that we do something. I don't have the specifics and details, but we can form a task force today to ensure that people can stay in their homes. And that is a true opportunity for HAR, because what we know is that home ownership is where the bulk of most minority people's wealth is focused. And we've got so many people into homes. We had the increase from 41% to 44%. God forbid that we should have this huge backtracking of the gains that we've made. And I believe that our association can be pivotal in keeping people in their homes.
Yes, and it hasn't quite been announced everywhere yet. We did send an email alluding to it last week, but HAR has established a diversity and inclusion advisory group. So, this panel today is really the first of many steps, I think, for us all to be able to move forward. Grant, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think, the challenge is, and I think LaDonna mentioned this, is systemic institutionalized racism. It's hard to recognize for all of us, or some of us. We can see the obvious conduct, but it's the daily conduct. It's the stuff that we don't recognize on a daily basis that we need to deal with. And so I think that's the challenge, is that it's around us, and it has been around us, and some of us are not seeing it. Some of us are not addressing it. Some of us are ignoring it. And so I think that's the challenge for a large group of people to recognize that it's ongoing. It's not just a police brutality here or there. It's every day.
Okay.
And so be sensitive to that, recognize it, address it, speak up about it, talk about it. Just don't let it go by, and be engaging to those who may be seeing it from a real sense, but those of us who may not be experiencing it like they are. So it's kind of it's a cross dynamic of getting engaged and understanding what some people are going through on a daily basis because of the institutionalized racism that still exists.
Yeah. So HAR, I mentioned HAR, we sent out an email to members last week. We received probably about 95% positive responses from that email. But there were about the 5% that had a very consistent message, and there was 3 specific points that we kept getting from that small percentage. And I'm gonna share them with you guys. And if any of our panelists have a comment, I'd like to hear your responses to some of these responses that we got. The first one was HAR should not be taking a stance against racism. Does anyone have a comment on that?
Should not.
HAR shouldn't be taking a stance against racism.
Well, Well, I kind of understand where somebody would ask that question because a lot of times they say you don't want to mix business with, anything else. And it's a very hard subject because, a lot of times you don't know what to say, you know what I'm saying? And it goes back to the listening at least. And I think sometimes, we think by avoiding a subject, we are doing better than what than anything else. So it goes back. I think I see where the question comes from. I always like to kind of dig in, and I just start saying, "Oh, this is wrong," or whatever. I kind of see where they're coming from. However, I think sometimes if you want to be a leader, I always tell all our agents among NAREP and everybody I know, I say, "You're a leader." When people come to you and they want to buy a house, they ask you for advice and everything. Be seen as a leader. Be seen as a leader. It's an opportunity because honestly, I call myself a consultant because I consult people about their life, and homeownership, is part of that. So I see where the question comes from, but I think a lot of times you cannot just avoid it.
Yeah.
By doing that, I think it's part of the problem, and I think we should just learn how to listen at times,
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of comments from our members saying, "Wow, I totally disagree. Can't believe somebody said that." Another person, Sheila, said, "Makes me proud to be a part of an association that supports equality." Another response, and I'll give LaDonna if you want to respond to this one. HAR should have condemned the looting and violence that has occurred at some protests.
So HAR represents both commercial and residential clients and real estate professionals. And spirited protest is part of the American way. And I believe HAR has a duty to, as Danny suggested, to listen and listen until you are clear on the most appropriate response. And sometimes the best response is no response. Sometimes it's best to be kind or be quiet. And in this instance, because it is such a controversial position, do you say, oh, okay, it's okay to loot, but likewise, do you say it's okay to kill Black people? And that is the dichotomy.
Yeah.
So when in this moment, if our association stands up and says, okay, we need all the Black people to stop burning stuff, right? Then are you then minimizing the lives that have been taken during this process?
Okay. Anyone else? Mike or Grant, did you have something to add to that?
I think LaDonna, she nailed it. I mean, that's the focus is on the police brutality, and that is an example of racism, and so that should be our focus and not be distracted off on other things and wade into this issue. And that's the problem with a lot of this is back to the earlier comment. Should we not be discussing? I mean, we need to wade into these issues. We need to be discussing them and be sensitive about them. And this needs to be on an ongoing basis and not get sidetracked by other things.
Okay. Mike, did you have anything?
I do want to add something, guys.
Oh, sure, Dean.
I also originated at Keller Williams Southwest, and great office, very diverse, and I can't turn the cheek and not look the other way and ignore it. But I mean, there are a lot of people out there, who have poured down into my life, and I think we got to be careful, guys. We don't want to demonize anybody like the white person right now. I spoke to several of my friends, and it kind of hurt me, guys. Honestly, I mean, hearing their stories, saying, my kids basically they're ashamed of being white, because of what's going on, and because everybody's labeling them as being a demon, and that hurts me a lot. Because honestly, I am where I'm at because a lot of those people opened up to me, and in my mind is like you shouldn't be ashamed of who you are. You shouldn't be ashamed or proud of who God made you. And I think the narrative is we need to be careful how we generalize and put everybody in a bucket because there's more good than there is bad. And I do want to address that, guys, because that's something that's been hurting me on all sides, seeing what's going on with my Black brothers and then seeing what's going on with my white counterparts because, number one, I don't think they're, demonizing somebody or a certain race is going to help. It's going to just continue opening the wound, making things worse. And I hate to see my friends' kids, hate themselves for being of a white color. So that's something I want to bring up. I mean, and guys, we got to be careful what we say, how we label people, because a lot of people have poured out in my life, from people who are on this panel down to all races of colors. And I am where I'm at because I've embraced them and I've learned their cultures. I've learned who they are, through our groups. I've learned how to service my black, agents. I mean, my black clients. I've worked with, Buddhist clients. So, I mean, I thank God that, learning through all these melting pots, I've been able to service my industry and my clients a lot better. But I think demonizing people and, whether they're black, they're Hispanic, they're white, and then saying that they're all like this, that's something that does need to stop, and I think we need to be very careful and wise with what we say. And I think that's going to take us a long way, and it's going to even, evolve the healing at a faster process. But I just wanted to add that, guys.
Yeah, very good. Mike, did you have anything on that?
Back on HAR stance, our government and our community leaders have already condemned the looting and violence. I'm proud of our city for the protests and demonstrations we had for George Floyd being peaceful. Really, Houston, economically, we've always been, a shining star to the country. And how we handle this, George was from Houston. How we handle and demonstrate our activities to the world should be by example. And that falls back on us as leaders in our industry as well, and on our association. It's like LaDonna said, sometimes there's things we don't have to say. We don't have to tell our people not to break the laws. But HAR has our back. You guys have been there for our diversity groups. You've been there for us as agents and members. So it's a fine line we have to walk, right? And I think we're doing it well. Can we do better? Do more? Absolutely.
Yeah. So one more response that we did get that I'd like you guys to discuss, because it has been a topic of discussion on social media, in the news, and that was the response we got was George Floyd was killed by a bad cop, not because he was black. If you guys have any comments on that.
Well, as I stated earlier, we are here today because of $20 and a stereotype. Our policing system is broken. It fails groups of people. And Mr. Floyd is dead today because we do not have accountability in the policing system, because we have allowed this to go on for too long. And as I mentioned earlier, it's not just Mr. Floyd that's dead. It's, Mr. Ahmaud Arbery. It's Breonna Taylor. It's Trayvon Martin. It's just countless. It's Sandra Bland. Okay, we have a policing system that, thank God, I believe this current outcry and standing in America and abroad is going to change policing if it doesn't change anything police reform.
Yeah, definitely. Anyone else have a response to that?
Police. I don't have this, or none of us should have this fear of the police. So that's an issue. Just like LaDonna said, there's something over time to where if LaDonna gets pulled over by a police officer, he has a heightened fear that I may not have. That's not right.
Look, I just start crying.
Right.
As I have.
That's unfair, and that should not exist. And so, is that training? Is that priorities? Is that hiring? Is that firing? We have a further review, further accountability within our police departments, because so certain members of our community have confidence that when they get pulled over, the right things will occur. They have confidence when they go to the courthouse that justice will be served. So there's some systematic things that that have been going on much too long that need to be addressed so that there is not this fear
Yeah.
that a lot of members in our community are experiencing with relative to the justice system, whether it be the police all the way to the courthouse.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Does anyone else have a response to that? If not, we can move on to the next topic. Okay, so the driving force for today's discussion was obviously the death of George Floyd. The Black community is not the only ethnic group has experienced racism, as we've discussed. At the beginning of this pandemic, there was a strong anti-Asian, anti-Chinese sentiment among people. One of actually our staff members was a cashier refused to take their money because she thought he was Chinese, which he's not. But in some cases, we've seen members of one ethnic group verbally attacking others. I've seen some comments that saying, you know, white people aren't the only ones that are racist. So we see this among minorities as well. How do your various multicultural groups and other multicultural groups work together? And do you have anything that you are working on to help address the issue of racism?
I'll start. I just, because we're talking about, coronavirus and discrimination against Asians, it's disappointing. I got dirty looks at the start of the pandemic while I was out shopping, and I was even wearing a mask, but, just being stereotyped and put in that category. It really opened my eyes to what different diversity members of our society experience just every day. For our groups, we, I'll call ourselves out. We need to do a better job. We need to, like Danny said, we need to listen. We need to listen to our members. We need to listen to our brother and sister groups. LaDonna and Danny know this. You know how long I've preached behind the scenes for a large collaboration for us. I'd love HAR to be a part of that and just bring us all together so that we can highlight our group. We can bring programs and educations to our members and empower our members to go out and impact our communities in positive ways and finally be that change that our world is calling out for now.
Yeah. Does anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
A shout out to my immediate past president, Kimberly Barnes, for calling out that instance on Facebook that was absolutely ugly. And beyond that, Matt Burris, our HAR Chief of Communications, for swiftly responding, making sure that action was taken to address that particular occurrence. And there are more of those things going on online. And one other person that I want to acknowledge is Kenya Burrell, who brought us together as during her tenure as chair of HA. She brought together a multicultural alliance that kind of kicked off these conversations where we could actively collaborate on some things. And with that, I mentioned the Fair Housing Act of 1968 that President Johnson signed right after Martin Luther King's death. It was right on the heels of yet another movement and another man's death. So with that, we got the Fair Housing Act of 1968. It started out as, discrimination against Blacks and minorities. Then it grew to include all kinds of different categories, from age to disability to sexual orientation, familial orientation. And this is what Dan NAREB is focusing. That law has been watered down. And what we can do as a community is rally back around the law and make sure that the laws are being implemented to benefit all people. And if we need to expand it, so be it. But we have to respect the laws of the land.
Yeah, very good. So prior to all of this, the Latino community was a target of racism regarding immigration. While we don't want to turn this into a political debate, and we could start with you, Danny, since you're representing NAHREP today. What are your thoughts on that, and how can we educate people on the important topic of immigration?
Well, I mean, one thing we always say, we're all immigrants to this country. I mean, people always complain about, give back the land to the Indians and everything. I mean, we were all immigrants at one point. Just some of us, a little bit later than anybody else. But I mean, I think it's going back. I don't want to get political either or anything like that. But I mean, going back, I think it's just having to do with the lack of education. 60% of the Hispanics that are here in the United States were born in the United States. I was born here as well. I mean, and when I hear comments, people say, go back to your country, it kind of makes me laugh because I'm like, this is my country.
Yeah.
I embrace America. I will die for America. If we were attacked by a foreign country, I think all of us would take arms and forget about who we are as a race and come together as Americans. We saw it during 9/11. So I think, a lot of it has to do with the lack of education. People need to go back and start paying attention to, more of the details, and I think the numbers, when you start putting it out there, going back, most of the minorities that are here have been here, and 80% of other Latinos who came in from, legally as well, they've been here, 11 years plus, and they have children, for example, like DACA, we advocate for that. These are all, 600 to 800,000 kids that were brought here involuntarily, and they don't have papers, and they just want to live in the country they grew up in, the culture they grew up in. They don't even know, much about, El Salvador, Central America. It's like, how do you deprive them from being, here in this country when they know nothing else? And when I hear the comments saying, go back to your country, I'm like, this is my country, Now,
Yeah.
thank God I haven't been personally attacked in that manner, but I hear it. But I mean, I think sometimes it's just ignorance, honesty. People who just don't know, and I hear it on all sides, guys. I hear it from other people. It's not necessarily just one race. I've heard it from other races as well. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say it's only the Anglos that are saying this. It's also even amongst Hispanics. It's even amongst the blacks. It's even amongst other people where I hear the comment. So to label one group, I think it's just general, where people are just speaking out of this, anger or whatever issues they're dealing with. And I just, like Michael said, we're not in high school anymore. Come on, we got to grow up. This is stuff that I didn't deal with in high school, and here I am now having to, revive it in the 2020 and explain this to my children. And they look at me and say, wait, we're Mexican, whatever. I said, I know they're proud of their Hispanic heritage, but they see themselves as Americans. And they know, honestly, they haven't even been to Mexico. So, somebody ever told them that, they'll be like, what? But a lot of it has to do with re-education, guys, and listening and understanding, where we're coming from. And as leaders, amongst our associations, we really have to lead by example.
Yeah, very good. Mike, LaDonna, Grant, anything that you want to add?
All I can say is the image of babies in cages tears me up. It is the most horrific policy I've seen in the creation of the detention camps and things like that. All I can say is America is better than that.
Yeah.
That's.
I mean, the people, a lot of people want to just react in the most simple way, and that's a knee-jerk response without being sensitive to an issue and without understanding the issue. So it gets back to where we started. You have to be sensitive, you have to be understanding, you have to take the time to know the issue, have discussion, and have knowledge, use your brain, get involved. Just don't be knee-jerk on everything because somebody else may pass that on to you. Take a stand, say something that perhaps may challenge that person into thinking about what they're actually saying.
Very good. Mike?
Guys, these conversations show us that we have a lot to fix as a society, and it falls on us not only as leaders and organizations, but as people. I feel like being the leader of a diversity group, our job is to motivate and empower and give people tools to lead. But we have to look at our members as well. We have to ask them to step up, not just take our message and go home, and remember it and repeat it when they're asked, but to go out there and live it and put it out there in the world so that we can finally get to effective change.
Very good. I see a comment from our Executive Vice President, Rene Galvan. He said, "Thank you for your participation in today's panel discussion. There's no way we can make the world better without talking about systemic racism that continues to exist. Your willingness to share your thoughts with our community is powerful and beautiful, and thank you for your leadership." And I wholeheartedly agree with that, Rene. I do just have one final thing for all of you. Just as a closing question to kind of end on a positive and productive note, and I think I'm so proud of our members for the amazing comments I've seen, and I know I couldn't get to all of them. I tried to show as many as possible, but thank you for that. Tomorrow, Houston will lay our native Houstonian, Mr. George Floyd, to rest. I'd like to hear from each of you. What value do you believe his life added to America, and just any last final thoughts that you have for HAR members? And I guess we could start with the order we did in the beginning. I'm sorry, Danny, if you want to start it for us. Yeah.
Well, I mean, number one, going back to this, I mean, and I'm admittedly saying I never understood the Black Lives Matters movement. And, sometimes we move on with life and just kind of say it doesn't affect me, so why bother? And I'm not saying that necessarily. I mean, I have friends that I spoke to, but in general, I hear the people like, it doesn't affect me, and why even get involved? But I think, going back, like they said earlier, it's been happening for years, but this time we were finally able to see it, and many of us were quarantined to our house. But going back, I keep emphasizing on this. It's made me realize to be a little bit more attentive to what's going on and understand it, not just, sweep it under the rug and say it's not affecting me, and then having my son watch, he loves police officers, and seeing this happening and seeing him kind of just drop his jaw and say, what is going on? Because it just passed on the news, and look at his face, I realized this is something I can't just sweep under the rug. I had to sit down with him and reemphasize what was going on, and try to reset his mind. So these are conversations in my household we're having now, and I'm starting to explain to them the difference in cultures, go back to a little bit of American history, and explain to them. So I think it's, instead of just letting it prolong, and letting something major happen that affects my kids, to finally try to explain it to them, it's reopened up that book of knowledge to say, let's sit down and talk about this. Let's sit down and explain to you what's going on. Let's explain to you why this is happening. And I think that's the biggest thing that has come out of this for me, and it's conversations I'm having with my family and my kids. And they're starting to see, what we've been preaching. We are battling a spiritual battle, in my opinion, that's biblical. I used to tell friends that say, how can you say a child is born with, sin? I'm like, we constantly teach kids how to do good. It seems like they already know how to do bad, and same thing with my kid. I got to keep emphasizing, drawing it to him, saying everybody has been created in God's image and we're alike, and that's my responsibility as a parent. And I'm taking that charge right now within my kids, so that then the future America will be better than the one we're leaving them.
Yeah, very good. Mike?
I'm just thinking about, how this has impacted me. I realized as a society, we failed every single human being by letting racism exist. I'm guilty of ignoring the cry of, my Black community, of the injustices that you guys have experienced. And this has been eye-opening. I mean, it wasn't, what started it was watching a human being die on TV. And it was broadcasted and shared on social media, and it's painful to watch. So, sorry, a human life was taken. It wasn't a show. It wasn't a movie. Going back to the problem. Okay, we failed. Going back to your question on education, we failed. We're not out there. We're not out there giving our society, our children, our kids a chance to become better, to overcome the racism, to overcome the stereotypes, the stigmas, how they're perceived in public, because they're not on an equal level and playing field. And, we failed in so many ways, and this is our chance to finally make that change.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mike. And I think we all agree we want to see change from here. LaDonna?
Wow, I am deeply touched and really grateful again to HAR for making this conversation happen, and for you, Christina, for really pouring your heart and soul into preparing this. And, um, regarding George Floyd's life, uh, gratitude to him and his family. Who knew? You think he knew that he would be change the world, as his little girl said on television, but his life has reawakened a sleeping giant called America and given new life to Black Lives Matter, who, well, I don't know, think you guys realize, but a number of young people died, were killed, were systematically murdered after the huge protest in Ferguson. So to have this movement restored and to have America and people around the world awaken to say, yes, Black lives do matter. Yes, they do. And then for us in Houston and across the nation to say, Black lives matter, Black homeownership matters. Homeownership matters. Black homeownership matters. It is the foundation of our, and again, what we can do, HBR, NAREB, AREA, HBREA, is collaborate to prepare for the other side of this pandemic as we stay safe. Remember, as of today, there are over 112,000 people dead. So we have to continue to be essential and be safe, yet find a way virtually to collaborate to make sure that the people, our communities on the other side that will be desperately impacted by this economy, the virus, and all of this, let's make sure that we help them retain their home ownership.
Excellent.
That's what we can do that.
Yeah. I see a lot of questions, not a lot of questions, a lot of comments. This time was different. Kamisha said we should have been having these conversations with our kids. Carol said fair housing matters. Yes. Grant, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we're here because of this police brutality issue, and it really hurts me that there is this fear and legitimate fear of dealing with the police. And so I think that's something that some accountability going forward needs to be put in place, so we start eliminating this fear, so that everybody feels like they're being treated fairly, whether by the police or the justice system. And that's been systematic, and perhaps people like me haven't recognized it until we have one of these events, and then we wait for the next event. We need to deal with it on a daily basis. I'll just read you what my 19-year-old daughter told me, and I embrace this. She said, "We must educate ourselves on why this continues to occur. Institutionalized racism is right in front of us in everyday life, but rarely do we acknowledge it, question it, or learn the history behind it. This needs to change so that we can effectively join the fight to dismantle and destroy it." And so I think that's my calling, and I think people perhaps sitting in my chair should have that same calling, and perhaps it should apply broad based. But I think this back to what LaDonna said earlier, that it's systematic, and a lot of us are not recognizing the systematic nature of it. We see these events and we deal with the events, but we're not dealing with what is being experienced on a daily basis, and that's where we need to be more sensitive, to be more engaging, to have more discussion, to have more thoughtfulness, to have more love. These things that are curable, we take the time to do it.
Very good. A comment here came in from Bob Hale, our president and CEO, who not only supported this panel, but was very, very proud and excited for us to do this, and thankful that all you leaders could be on with us. He said George Floyd's teacher said his goal as a young man was to be on the Supreme Court. So I think that you know speaks, yeah, that speaks a lot to, though, as Mike discussed, education and things along the way that, you know, and this systemic racism that we have in this country that may have prevented that, right? So. Again, thank you all. So many comments coming in, and if you guys will take some time after this to kind of go through those comments and reply to a few people. Dania, there was a question for you specifically about a way to get involved with NAHREP in the Pearland area. So if you guys would just take some time after we're done here, and maybe if there's any questions I missed or comments I missed, if you'll reply to them. Val said every member of HAR should experience this panel's discussion because it was so important, and I agree. So again, thank you to all of the panelists, Grant, Mike, Danny, LaDonna. Thank you for being open and honest as I asked you to be. I truly appreciate it. Any final thoughts? I know I gave you guys all a chance to say final thoughts, but anything else that we may have missed?
Open your eyes and your ears.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Guys, we live in a great city, man. I really, honestly, like I said it before, I mean, Houston always comes together. We're one of the most diverse cities in the nation, and I think we can lead the way. You know, for example, homeownership for Hispanics here it's one of the number one areas where Hispanics are buying. And just seeing the diversity that we embrace, the cultural and everything, I think we're a beacon for the rest of the city. I think it starts with us as well here as being leaders in our association.
Yeah, very good. Somebody asked if we were recording this because they want other people to see it. We absolutely do. As soon as we finish here, this becomes a video that will stay on our Facebook page indefinitely. So I encourage you, if you haven't shared it yet, you can share this post with anyone right now, or you can share it after we're done. All right, well, that is it for today's Member Focus Monday. Again, to all my panelists, thank you so much. To all of the members and even non-members, I saw a few non-members watching as well. So thank you for watching today and for being a part of this discussion with us, because as I said in the beginning, we have to have these difficult conversations to be able to move forward, and hopefully, you know, the words will turn into actions as we all expressed. So thank you again for joining this Member Focus Monday. We'll see you next Monday at 9 a.m. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye.